Tonight on Primetime, a significant shift in the U.S. military posture in Europe as Washington announces it will send an additional 5,000 troops to Poland, even as earlier plans signaled a drawdown of U.S. forces across the continent. Is this a reinforcement of NATO's eastern flank or a sign of shifting priorities inside the alliance? Welcome to the program. I'm Andy Miocz. The United States is increasing its military presence in Poland, despite earlier signals of possible troop reductions elsewhere in Europe. The announcement comes amid ongoing discussions within NATO over regional security and defense spending.
US President Donald Trump has announced that the United States will send an additional 5,000 troops to Poland, days after the Pentagon delayed a previously planned troop deployment to the country. In a post on Truth Social on Thursday, Trump said the decision followed the election of Polish President Karol Nawrocki and highlighted the relationship between the two leaders. Responding on X, Nawrocki thanked Trump for his support and described the Polish-American alliance as a key pillar of security for both Poland and Europe. The announcement comes as the Trump administration reviews U.S. troop deployments in Europe under its America First policy. Ahead of the NATO meeting in Sweden, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte welcomed the troop announcement while stressing that European allies are taking greater responsibility for their own defence.
Well, of course, I welcome the announcement. Our military commanders are working through all the details, but of course I welcome it. But let's be clear. The trajectory we are on, which is a stronger Europe and a stronger NATO, making sure we will, over time, step by step, be less reliant on one ally only, as we have been for so long, which is the United States.
Earlier this month, the Pentagon announced plans to cut the number of U.S. Army Brigade combat teams in Europe from 4 to 3, raising concerns about America's long-term military presence in the region. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth later said the delay in the Poland deployment was temporary and stressed that Washington remains committed to a strong presence there. It is still unclear whether the additional troops announced by Trump are tied to the delayed deployment or will come from other bases in Europe, including Germany, where the U.S. plans to withdraw 5,000 troops. The move comes amid NATO debates over defense spending, with Trump urging European allies to do more for regional security. Poland, one of NATO's top defence spenders, currently hosts about 10,000 US troops as the war in Ukraine continues.
Well, I'm joined now by geopolitical analyst Ines Burrell to discuss the evolving US military posture in Europe, including troop movements towards Poland, potential reductions elsewhere, and what this could signal for NATO's long-term strategic balance. Ines, welcome. Great to have you on the show. Now, just how should we interpret this apparent contradiction with Washington sending troops to Poland while also signaling it's going to draw down troops elsewhere in Europe, specifically in Germany?
Well, it's mostly just moving around the pieces on the chessboard and pretending that they are trying to achieve something different than they're saying. In reality, if we remember, about 10 days ago, or maybe a bit less, they expected rotation of troops back to Poland. Didn't happen. Troops were taken off the airplanes and not returned back to Poland where they were supposed to go. These 5,000, as we're told, might be the same troops that were supposed to go to Poland a week ago. According to Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski, he said that after this, roughly the same number of American troops should remain in Poland. So for all we know, it's just that Washington said they will not rotate the troops, and then they decided that they will rotate the troops. It's really not quite clear, but that's what it starts looking like. And it seems that this is a way for Washington to exert its power over Europe and try to pull Europe into a situation with Iran, because that's what is actually on Washington's mind.
Now, Ines, would you say that this is a genuine reinforcement of the eastern flank, or is Washington effectively redistributing its military footprint while still moving towards a long-term drawdown in Europe in general?
This doesn't look like anything genuine. In fact, it looks like tactical attack on Europe, really, because you might remember recently it was announced that Washington is going to pull out troops from Germany. Well, as far as I know, 5,000 people. They were also supposed to deploy long-range missiles and rockets to Germany. Now, from what we understand, this is not going to go on. Troops, where we have roughly 80,000 American troops in Europe, 5,000 here or there is not going to make much difference. However, with not going ahead with deployment of long-range missiles, that is an important step. We need those long-range missiles much more than we need those 5,000 men. And that's what we're not going to get, it would seem.
And what does this tell us about Washington's priorities here? You've mentioned the attack of sorts on Europe. Would you say that this latest step is more about deterring Russia in Poland, or just reducing strategic exposure in Western Europe under Trump's America First approach?
I think it's probably actually a form of blackmail first, because Americans want Europeans to go to Middle East and fight their war there. They want to Europeans to help them unblock the Strait of Hormuz and settle the situation there. Europeans are refusing, obviously. They're saying they are willing to help when the situation is settled finally. So that's not gonna happen for a while, as we understand. Trump's and Washington's only interest in Europe is only to make sure that Europe can be useful to them. They're not interested in being useful to Europe at the moment. Obviously, it's America first, which means everybody else last. So for America, the first thing is war in Iran. Now, if they have to push Europe around a bit for that, they're going to do that. That's probably why the initial withdrawal of troops was announced last week, and why now they're pretending that they are giving us more troops, which is not true. It would seem that it's the same amount, but by making it look like there's suddenly going to be more troops, that would look like America is more interested in European security, when in fact they're actually interested only in what is happening in the Middle East.
And you've said the word blackmail there. How seriously would you say that European NATO members are taking this perception that US security guarantees are becoming more conditional or politically driven, and how seriously should they take it?
Well, I think by now they have understood that Washington is not intending to send much help in case of any hostilities with Russia. The fact that they still have troops in Europe is essential, and it doesn't really matter how many troops we have, as long as there are troops which could be attacked. That would pull Washington into the situation, any situation that Russia would cause. However, the larger picture is that Europe knows that Washington is not coming to its aid. It has a number of maybe months, maybe years to deal with the situation, to make sure it's strong enough, or at least it looks like they will answer if something happens, not just try to their usual strong concerns and condemnations. And in the meantime, Washington is going to try to strong arm Europe into helping them with whatever they need, and Europe is going to pretend that they believe in that they think that America is interested in Europe's welfare, and it's going to be a game of we know you're lying, And you know that we know that you're lying, but everybody will pretend and do what they're supposed to do.
And in those circumstances, Ines, would you say that this could perhaps accelerate a structural shift inside NATO, where Europe is assuming more responsibility for its own defense much faster than previously planned?
Well, I would think that the structural change that you might be thinking of is actually quite a bit different. It starts looking like Europe not being able to look after itself properly because America was there for them, have now realized that without America, they will have a bit of a problem. So they're looking for somebody else who's strong enough to protect them. Oh, that is Ukraine. So they are not necessarily becoming independent. They're just finding another umbrella. And because Ukraine has nowhere else to go, they're where they are, they're between Europe and Russia, they have to fight this war. And Europe is going to bring ammunition if it has to, but that's about it. The structure is such that it would seem that America is going out and Ukraine is coming in. And that's quite a big shift.
Yeah, we did hear some other signals from Europe regarding Ukraine, specifically the letter from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz about that special status for Ukraine and a lower one for the Western Balkans countries. Now, back to the alliance itself, would you say that these latest adjustments might impact the alliance's internal cohesion, especially ahead of this long anticipated summit?
It will only impact it as much as Europe and Canada allows it to, because essentially, as I said, we know America is not going to help, or at least they will try to do the least possible amount of things they can get away with. So if instead of being sidelined by America, it would be wiser to sideline America. You get on with what you're supposed to do. And if Americans want to get involved eventually, that's very nice, but that's a bonus. All the plans have to be built for eventuality that Washington is not going to be there, or at least are not going to be there as much as we expect them to be. And then we can build proper new plans that are going to actually work instead of imaginary ones where we are dependent on somebody else's whim and oppose them through social.
Ines, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime and sharing your insight.
You're welcome.
All right, after a short break, we'll turn to Sweden, where NATO foreign ministers have gathered for talks focused on defense spending, burden sharing, and long-term support for Ukraine. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. NATO foreign ministers met in Sweden to lay the groundwork for what could be a contentious leaders summit in Turkey in July. It comes after NATO allies refused to join the United States in its military campaign against Iran. Ross Cullen reports.
Well, the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said that this was a very good meeting of the foreign ministers in Sweden on Friday, although he admitted that there had been some disagreements, but saying that we are a democratic alliance, there will always be debates. Now, one of those areas of disagreement was over the announcement by the United States that it was withdrawing 5,000 soldiers from Europe and then sending 5,000 soldiers to Europe. That was confusion, according to the Swedish foreign minister, about if those troops are leaving Germany, if the troops are coming to Poland. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State in attendance on Friday, did say that it is a long-standing aim that over time the United States will have a reduction in the number of troops that it has based here in Europe. Also, there was preparations at this summit for the leaders gathering, which will take place in Turkey in July. And at that meeting, the US President Donald Trump will come face to face with the leaders who defied him, the leaders who refused to join in with the war in Iran, like France's Emmanuel Macron, Britain's Keir Starmer, and Germany's Friedrich Merz. And so that could be potentially a contentious summit when the leaders meet in July. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
Well, as NATO foreign ministers are meeting for 2 days of talks focused on the alliance's strategic priorities and long-term security challenges ahead of the Ankara summit, we're now joined by Lieutenant General Rafael Martins, coming to us from Lisbon to discuss what's emerging from these discussions. Lieutenant General, welcome. Great to have you on the program. Now, as these talks have started, the focus, at least the announced one, is on defense spending and burden sharing. How serious would you say is the concern among especially European member states that the continent still isn't moving fast enough on its own military readiness?
Thank you again for having me. Well, I think it's very important to have this preparation meeting with the foreign ministers of the NATO alliance on preparation for, as you said, for July, and actually to soften a little bit the sharp edges that have been coming out from the tensions and from the wording of Trump, which is not always very nice with the Europeans. But he's right. I mean, the Americans have a global influence, and they have global commitments in terms of the security architecture. And they have been pushing the NATO allies for initially 2%, and then a further 3% up to 5% of defense spending until or after 2030. We know very well that the Eastern flank countries have been pushing harder on the defense spending, and a few others have not been so willing to do and to cooperate with the alliance. Marco Rubio was, I think, very diplomatic on his communications in the end of this meeting, especially answering, I think, very directly and honestly to the press questions, and stating that the Americans, they have commitments not only in the Far East, in China, of course, also in the Middle East, in the Americas, and eventually in other places. They are pushing a little bit also towards the Arctic. And as they are reconfiguring, they're putting a new geometry on their resources. So they want the Europeans, since we have now more demanding security challenges, they want the European countries to push to be stronger, so that the NATO is stronger to face European security challenges. But not only that, he has also mentioned that eventually if the Strait of Hormuz is not solved, or if it's solved but it requires the presence of some European countries, he wants them there to contribute to a future that is, I think, a better future for the world and for most of the economies of the world.
On that European security that you've mentioned, the Russia-Ukraine war shows no signs of easing. Now, is there any sign that NATO is shifting from short-term military support to Kiev towards a longer-term security strategy, or are allies still just reacting to events as they unfold?
Well, there are a few allies that are more vocal and stronger than others. And as you mentioned, I think the Europeans are committed to a more medium to long term. And we've heard, especially from a high-ranking politician from Germany, that the commitment is here to stay. And it is not only to stay, it's to be a stronger commitment towards the Ukraine war with Russia. And I think there are very strong signals, not only in terms of the investment in the industrial defense technological base of the Europeans, and they are showing very strong signals. And also they are pushing for Ukraine not to enter immediately within the European Union, but to have a different, to be associated. So it's a different wording, because to become part of the European Union, it requires a longer, a more bureaucratic process. But there is this terminology that is to be an associated member and to be invited eventually for the NATO summit that will take place in Ankara in 2 months.
Lieutenant General, you've touched upon these differences in tone between allies when it comes to spending and strategic priorities. How fragile is the unity within the alliance behind closed doors?
There are, I would say, it's asymmetries, but you can also make interpretations from the more or less committed towards what one of the allies has done. And we have to be clear on this. The US and Israel, they went into Iran, I think, convinced that it would be much faster to have a solution of the two main things, which is the nuclear issue, and now as becoming the Strait of Hormuz. If that was to be solved, I think we would not have this tension and this misunderstanding of the position of some Europeans towards the movement of the United States, which has an ally, would like to have the Europeans or the NATO members ready and with open doors and with open air bases or with open military facilities to facilitate their logistics. Not all countries have done that. Some have done one way, others have done others have almost blocked their airspace to prevent the United States from flying directly and being more committed to this conflict. So that has generated a kind of not only a suspicion, but will you be there when I really need you, like Trump said. And I think now we are correcting that. And I think this summit, this meeting today, and the summit that will take place in July is going to make it more clear. The NATO countries have to meet the expectations, because the challenges of the security of Europe and beyond are strong challenges. And we all have to stick together to make it happen or to avoid more difficult times.
Well, with these talks in Sweden ahead of the summit this July, would you say that these talks will succeed in smoothing over those sharp edges you've mentioned, or maybe expose the gaps in how allies view future threats?
I would say both. I would say both, because if you speak clearly and if you avoid putting emotions and sometimes close to, it's the Trump style, and we all know that Trump is sometimes vocal, and he is a little bit uses of excessive terms that do not facilitate diplomacy, and sometimes dialogue gets a little bit poisoned. I would use this, and you have to put a little bit my word to calibrate my words. So the meeting is not only going to expose, but I think it's also going to make it more clear that there is a purpose for the alliance, and we are much better within the alliance, with a stronger alliance. If each country is stronger, then pushing the alliance, make it fragile, and eventually leading into a fragmentation. And I think that is something that is in the horizon, or was in the horizon, and needs to be dissipated through dialogue and through a deeper cooperation and a much more burden-sharing posture.
And Lieutenant General, there have, of course, been statements of unity coming out of Sweden, statements from the Americans saying that their decisions to shift their posture are not political but technical. But what would you say these talks reveal about NATO's ability to adapt quickly to shifting global security threats rather than responding after the fact?
It is a challenge. We know, and I think, I don't know if it was immediately before me that it was mentioned that the allies in Europe, they have some aspects that are only covered by the United States. The United States is a stronger ally. They have very good capabilities, namely in the air defense domain, in interceptors. And if they go away, if they move, because they are necessary, those capabilities are needed somewhere else in other geographies, the European countries will be more fragile towards eventual aggression. And they need to work very hard and very fast to mitigate those insufficiencies and to become autonomous in several domains. And that's why they are identifying the shortfalls, and they are providing force postures for NATO to become stronger and more resilient to any threats. And of course, to make if they're stronger, they will create obstacles to any possible aggression or temptation to aggression. Deterrence, that's the word that I meant to say. They will create an effective deterrence.
And finally, would you say that what we've heard coming out of Sweden and these talks themselves overall show that NATO is more forward looking in its strategy, or does it remain still more reactive?
The summits are there used to be refreshing or a revision of the NATO strategic concept every 10 years. The events that have been coming since the last decades, they have been so dramatic, so disruptive, that now almost every 2 or 3 years we should revise the NATO strategic concept to make it appropriate to this new dynamics, to this very fast changing world. And NATO needs to be much more agile in this process. It is still a little bit tied to previous stability. It's no longer a stability, it's a world that is stable. The world is changing very fast, and the NATO, like the countries, they need to be able to be much more agile, less bureaucratic, and be ready to implement, to have the tools to respond to the new challenges, but also to have the instruments for deterrence. That, I think, it's very important, and I do really appreciate that. Was a great questions that you have put forward. Thank you.
The world is changing fast indeed. Lieutenant General, thank you kindly for joining us on Primetime and sharing your analysis.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, after a short break, a full wrap-up from the closing day of the World Urban Forum here in Baku, where discussions have focused on the global housing crisis and the shift towards more practical urban solutions. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. The final day of the 13th World Urban Forum here in the Azerbaijani capital saw discussions focusing on the key challenges cities, towns, and settlements are going to face today and in the future. Panels addressed indigenous peoples' housing rights, land-related issues, and the challenges they face in urban areas, as well as rapid urbanization and the integration of green technologies. Leila Rahimli reports.
We are coming to you from the final day of the 13th session of World Urban Forum. The event is wrapping up today, but the momentum hasn't slowed down, with experts tracking some of the most critical challenges facing our future cities. Today's closing sessions feature two completely different yet equally urgent panels. The first brought a sharp focus on social justice, highlighting the systematic barriers indigenous peoples face. Experts from around the globe shared first-hand experience of overcrowding, land grabbing and the exclusion of indigenous identities from urban spaces. The consensus here was clear: securing the right to adequate housing requires an immediate, holistic approach combining legal protection with culturally appropriate urban design.
It's reality that we don't use the terminology of indigenous people, but diversity existed in Azerbaijan many centuries, and we have a better model, multiculturalism model, which has existed, which is functionable, and we are creating the equal possibilities for all communities living in Azerbaijan. We're respecting all heritage, all groups living in this country, be it churches, mosques, synagogues, and etc., and also all nations, all minorities living in Azerbaijan have the same rights of getting education in their own languages, getting publication in their own languages. We are respecting their cultures, their beliefs, and etc. So we shared our experiences, and we also offer, as a hosting country, that we need to work on new housing programs. We need to include indigenous communities for shaping these policies. During urban planning, we need to work together to include diversity, because cities is not just the physical places where we live, but it's also a cultural environment, places where the people should be respected. We need to include all communities.
The second panel session focused on rapid urbanization and green technology. Experts shared practical strategies on how to embed renewable energy, smart grids and circular systems into a modern infrastructure. Two very different discussions today, but they share a single bottom line. The cities of tomorrow must protect both their people and the planet. That's all for now. This is Leyla Rahimli with Zohrab Shirinov for A News.
Well, the global housing challenge has been in focus here in Baku, where governments, city leaders and urban experts gathered for the World Urban Forum. The event has now wrapped up with calls for faster action towards safer, more resilient and more affordable cities.
The 13th World Urban Forum has concluded in Baku, ending a week of global talks on housing, urban planning and safer cities. The forum brought together over 57,000 participants, including more than 3,000 online, from 176 countries, making it the largest World Urban Forum to date. The forum was convened by UN Habitat and co-organized with the government of Azerbaijan under the theme Housing the World, Safe and Resilient Cities and Communities. Organizers say the program included 579 sessions, 260 exhibitors, 11 heads of state, 88 ministers, 130 mayors and representatives from governments, cities, civil society, academia and the private sector.
As we mark the implementation midpoint of the new urban agenda, the message from Baku is clear. The next decade must be defined by accelerated implementation, scaled delivery, and measurable impact in people's lives.
Discussions focused on the global housing crisis, with nearly 3 billion people worldwide living in inadequate housing conditions. Participants also looked at informal settlements, housing finance, crisis recovery, climate risks, and the need to place housing at the center of sustainable urban development. The forum concluded with the Baku Call to Action, a stakeholder-led document calling for faster action on housing and sustainable urbanization.
Over these days, Baku once again demonstrated the importance of solidarity, partnership, and effective multilateral cooperation in addressing global challenges. WUF 13 has shown that adequate housing and resilient communities can only be achieved through shared responsibility, coordinated action, and strong international cooperation.
The closing of WUF 13 also marks the handover to Mexico, which will host the next World Urban Forum in Mexico City in 2028.
And now to discuss the key takeaways from the closing day of the World Urban Forum in Baku and what it has delivered over the past week, I'm joined now by Eldar Rasulov, Senior Manager for Content and Media Relations at the WUF 13 Azerbaijan Operations Company. Eldar, welcome. Great to have you in the studio. Now, after nearly a week of talks here in Baku, what concrete, specific, practical difference would you say that WOF 13 is going to make once delegates go back home? Do you see them implementing any of these measures or concepts or ideas they've got here in the Azerbaijani capital?
First of all, Andy, I appreciate the invitation. I came here straight from Baku Olympic Stadium, and as I just want to confirm that I'm overwhelmed with emotion right now, because it's been a tough week, but not in terms of, I would say it was a challenging week, because I was here at A News around a week ago. We at the morning show with Nadia, with one of your colleagues, we were speaking about our expectation about throughout the World Urban Forum, the 13th session of the World Urban Forum. And I'm glad to say that we've managed to meet our own expectation, at least. We were discussing how this particular session is different between previous session of the World Urban Forum. And one of the new features was, for example, the start of the WOF 13 was marking the ministerial meeting on the new urban agenda. That was progress made on the new urban agenda that brought together representatives of governments from all around the world to discuss, in a nutshell, what to do in the next 10 years. And what concludes WOF 13 is Baku Call to Action document. That's the main outcome of the WOF 13 of this session, which prioritize and highlight the main things, main priorities, main adjustment that needs to be made global-wise to make housing better. If I were to explain it to a 5-year-old, so WOF 13 brought together a lot of experts, a lot of government representatives all around the world, brought them together on a ministerial level, on a head of state level, and at the outcome of this, we got a document on a paper on our table that calls upon to everyone, to all the stakeholders, which is basically everyone. If we're talking about the future of cities, the citizens of the future cities is everyone. So this document, as you say, we hope, as we say, from the vibe of it, from the feedback that we get from them, we see them going back to their homes and implementing them in their national policies.
And Eldar, we've seen a lot of events covering a wide range of issues. There was climate resilience, there was modernization, even gender inclusivity, a lot of problems today in the housing situation. Now, with all these approaches combining into one after this session and after previous sessions, when these participants go back home and don't implement anything, whose fault is that, would you say? Where does that gap between policy and delivery happen?
That's an interesting question. It's easy to point fingers when something already happened. So, as we say, we know the statistics. We know that experts claim that by 2050, two-thirds of the population are going to live in urban areas. That's the fact. That's the expectation, and it's easier to point a finger and say that what could have been done to prevent this. And now it's harder to understand what exactly needs to be done to prevent it in next 10 years or the next around 25 years that's left by 2050. At least Baku created a platform to bring awareness about this once again. Of course, it's been done once every 2 years, and it's been done several times beforehand, and we tried to bring something new. So discussions are going on, and of course the implementation part is, I think it's the responsibility of each particular stakeholder. But we, as Azerbaijan, we are hoping to become one of the regional hubs that are going to voice these issues more often. And because our journey about the sustainable urbanization hasn't started with WOOF 13. We've been conducting national urban forums for over 2 years now, and the liberated areas as well. So our journey started several years ago, and by hosting WOOF 13, we put ourselves there. We showed that we care and we want to bring everyone together here. And I think the next 2 years, at least till Mexico, till the next host of WOOF 14 host the event. Let's see what happens in 2 years, and then maybe it will be easier to point fingers.
Indeed. You touched upon Azerbaijan there, the host country, did showcase its own sustainability sustainable development strategy. How important would you say that this global stage, the World Urban Forum, is for each country to strengthen its own individual plan for development?
I think what makes it more possible to happen is a lot of, for example, from my point of views, your colleagues, I'm sure as well, they've seen a lot of new memos happening, a lot of new deals happening between different institutions around the world. For example, there were some new event that was new to World Urban Forum, such as NGO forum, NGO platforms. So we brought together not only government representatives, we brought together not only academic institutions, but representatives of civil societies. We tried to give a voice to everyone, so that when they go back to their country and they learn something new from the region. For example, as Azerbaijan, we showcased our experience of building and implementing smart villages, smart cities. I'm pretty sure there are urban experts around the world that came here and they saw Azerbaijani pavilion at Urban Expo, for example. And maybe some of them has raised the question mark in their brains that when I go back home, I'm going to ask corresponding facilities, corresponding organizations, institutions, how it can be done in our country, for example. And the same applies for Azerbaijan. We as a country, our citizens walked around Urban Expo. They attended hundreds of special sessions, hundreds of events, and they've seen experts all around the world speaking about their particular experience. And I'm sure it's going to raise some question from the local population as well. So how that particular experience could be applied and standardized in our national urbanization. So I think it works both ways, and it raises questions. What WOOF 13 does best in WOOF, at least WOOF does best in my opinion, is it gives a platform for brainstorming and it raises a question. And when you raise a question, there is a possibility that you get a good answer.
And this fast-changing world with such rapid urbanization, growing cities, climate changes happening, how fast would you say that the global agenda adapts to the situation on the
It's
ground?
hard to say. It's hard to say. Well, only 10 years ago, and maybe even less, some of the bullet points, like sustainable development goals, so like Paris Agreement, all of them had not deadlines, but at least a point to refer to. And you're absolutely right. The world is changing so fast that sometimes they need to be adjusted. The documents itself, such as the new urban agenda, for example. That's why we, as a host country, we offered to start the official start of WOOF 13 as the ministerial meeting on progress made on the new urban agenda. Okay, we had new urban agenda. It has some things that we need to refer to, that we need to, as a benchmark to see. But so that's why we need to adjust and we need to revise the documents that have been agreed several years ago to see because with everything, with the rapid temp of urbanization, technological progress, artificial intelligence, we need to adjust. We need to adapt to that rate. So I think every other session of World Urban Forum, I think from now on also we'll try, in my opinion, after Azerbaijani experience, we'll try to revise, look back to the past documents that has been agreed upon, and trying to adjust it to the modern times.
Well, now that the session is over, what's the most important thing now for each individual country, government, NGO, expert institute to implement any of these measures agreed or seen, shared?
First, at the top of my head, for example, for Azerbaijan, the main outcome of this event would be that a lot of people learned at least something about urbanization, about sustainable urbanization. For example, we conducted with 13 festivals before the event started, and more than 150,000 people in 9 cities around Azerbaijan learned something about World Urban Forum. Some of them, probably many of them, most of them didn't know anything about World Urban Forum, why it existed. And if they didn't know that, they didn't know the statistics that I was talking about, that a lot of people are going to live in cities, in a nutshell. So there are problems, there are challenges that need to be addressed by this. And that applies to the countries. I'm happy, I'm proud that as an Azerbaijani citizen, I'm proud that we see how the city is changing for last years, in terms of green vehicles, micromobility, or the easiest part, the bicycle lanes, the scooter lanes. Okay, it's not something very new for us, but now we know the background of it. We know why this is needed. It's not just the visibility, just to make some trendy adjustments. Now our people know the history and know the background of it. I think it's important to include citizens, to include every stakeholder in the process, not to just present them the paper and saying, okay, well, now we have Baku call to action, for example. For our citizens, now it's going to be more interesting because we know what lays down of it. So I think the path to sustainable urbanization lays on raising awareness on each level, and covering every stakeholder. So that I think that could be one of the main take points for the countries that participated at World Urban Forum, the 13th session of the World Urban Forum.
And Eldad, I'm sure you've had a chance to speak from people from all over the world. Yeah. How many was it? More than 180 countries.
Yeah.
Where are we as humans when it comes to this urbanization, development, the housing crisis in general? How aware are we as a species?
Well, look, so you know my position. I'm a senior manager for content and media relations. I will speak frankly. Before starting my journey at WUF 13, I wasn't an expert at sustainable urbanization or urbanization in general. Not an expert, and now I'm still not an expert. But this session gave me a chance to learn more things about it and convey the messages of the World Urban Forum and the Sustainable Urban Agenda to as many people as we can as a communication team. We were trying to get feedback from people from the very beginning, and we conducted info sessions at universities and across the country. Some of the students raised really good questions. You can see that they are interested in the issue, and we observed the same thing in the participants of World Urban Forum. By the questions they raise at the press conferences, there are some deepness in that. So people are concerned. Sometimes we observe that the issues of the ecological issues and the climate change issues. And many of the participants were at least surprised to see that these both are intertwined. The climate change issues, the ecological transition issues, green issues, and urbanization are really, really intertwined. That was at least one key point that most of the participants took. That was the observation from the session. So I think that will give an impulse for regional countries, at least for regional countries, because I've seen a lot of documents signed, a lot of cities, a lot of ministries that had memorandums of understanding. So that will open a dialogue. I can imagine the number of that. So there were at least 150 events in one day during 19th, 20th, and 21st of May, and almost each of them was finished and concluded by two parties or three or more parties signing a deal, bringing new investment and opening a dialogue. So I can't tell the exact statistics of the population participants knowing about urbanization, but I'm sure after this, at least it's going to increase.
It will, I'm sure of it. Eldar, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
Primetime. All right, after a short break, we'll be checking in with our correspondents across the globe. Don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime. Newly released documents suggest Queen Elizabeth II was keen for her son, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, to take up a senior trade envoy role amid renewed scrutiny of his tenure. Zainab Farajzadeh has the story.
Newly released government documents show that Queen Elizabeth II was very keen for her son, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, to become Britain's trade envoy in 2000. The files reveal senior officials believed Mountbatten-Windsor should take on what was described as a prominent role in the promotion of national interests after the end of his active naval career. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor served as the UK's Special Representative for International Trade and Investment until 2011, representing Britain on overseas. The documents also contain internal communications about media handling surrounding his trips, including advice on careful and sometimes strict media management. One memo stated that Mountbatten-Windsor preferred visiting what were described as more sophisticated countries, while another requested that public golfing events should not be arranged during overseas visits. The release of the files has once again brought attention to the controversies surrounding his time in office. During his years as a trade envoy, Mountbatten-Windsor faced criticism over the use of helicopters and expensive travel funded by taxpayers, including claims that some trips were linked to golf-related events. Questions were also raised about his relationships with wealthy international figures and political elites in countries including Kazakhstan, Libya, and Tunisia. The newly released documents also come after renewed scrutiny over Mountbatten-Windsor's past links to Jeffrey Epstein. He has repeatedly denied wrongdoing regarding both his business relationships and his role as trade envoy. The government says the documents were released because of exceptional public interests surrounding his former official position. Zainab Farajzadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Iran says it is tightening control over shipping through a vital maritime corridor as tensions with Washington continue after the recent conflict. Turash Ralilu has the details.
I'm reporting from the Iranian waters at the Strait of Hormuz, connecting the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. The strategic waterway through which a major share of world's oil and gas, as well as critical petrochemicals, is transited, has turned to a hot point of contention between Tehran and Washington in the wake of the Israel-US war with Iran. While the US has imposed maritime blockade over Iran's southern ports, Iran has been retaliating by defying the move and clamping down its own control over the waterway. In the latest development in the post-war standoff between Iran and US, Iran's Revolutionary Guards announced on Thursday that it allowed 31 commercial vessels to pass through the strait. Iran has also been charging the vessels sailing through the narrow corridor with safe navigation escorting poles. Also earlier this week, Iranian authorities announced that they have increased the geographical zone under their control on both sides of the Strait of Hormuz. The extension brings under Iran's grip the oil exporting terminals of the regional countries which were not under Iranian Navy's monitoring. Kurash Shiralilu from the Strait of Hormuz, Foreign News.
Azerbaijan and Georgia have signed major new deals covering gas, electricity, oil transit, and rail links this week. Tbilisi says the agreements are critical for energy security and regional connectivity. Nini Nikolashvili reports from the Georgian capital.
Agreements signed with Azerbaijan are of fundamental importance to Georgia, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhti said in an interview with local media. Speaking upon his return from Baku, Kobakhti described the deals as landmark agreements, saying that the negotiations were conducted not as a standard process between two governments, but as a dialogue between friends. The centerpiece of the package is a 20-year extension of the natural gas supply agreement originally signed in 2003, which Kobakhti described as critical for Georgia's energy security. The deal guarantees the gas volumes Georgia needs and maintains the transit framework under the South Caucasus pipeline project. Alongside the gas agreement, the two countries also signed a 20-year intergovernmental agreement on electricity supply and transit, covering both import and cross-border electricity transmission arrangements. One of the most significant developments concerns the Baku-Tbilisi-Supsa pipeline, which has remained idle for the past 3 years. Under a newly signed operational agreement, the pipeline, which remains Georgian property, will resume transporting oil from Central Asia to European markets. Officials say that the move could generate tens of millions of dollars in annual transit revenue for Georgia. On the transport front, the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway is expected to resume full operations shortly, with Georgian Railways assuming operational responsibilities through a joint venture with Azerbaijan. In addition, daily passenger train services between Tbilisi and Baku will resume on May 26 after a 6-year suspension. The agreements were signed on the sidelines of the World Urban Forum, which has brought together leaders from across the globe. Strategically located at the crossroads between the Caspian and Black Seas, Georgia plays a key role in regional connectivity. The latest agreements further strengthen the strategic partnership between Georgia and Azerbaijan across the energy, transit, and transportation sectors. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Uzbekistan has opened an Uzbek-Syrian trade house and distribution center in the Syrian city of Aleppo as part of efforts to expand exports and strengthen trade ties with the Middle East. Sevil Rajapova has the details.
The Uzbek-Syrian Trade House officially began operations in Aleppo with participation of Chamber of Commerce and Industry Chairman Davron Vahabov, Uzbekistan's ambassador to Kuwait Ayubhon Yunusov, and more than 100 entrepreneurs from Uzbekistan and Syria. According to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the new center is expected to promote products under the Made in Uzbekistan brand and create new export opportunities for Uzbek businesses. The project will also serve as a logistics and distribution hub. Officials say delivery of one cargo container from Uzbekistan to Aleppo currently takes around 10 days, with transportation costs averaging $2,500. Earlier, Davron Vahabov estimated that Uzbek exports to Syria could reach between $100 and $150 million at the initial stage, mainly through supplies of automobiles, spare parts, food products, and electrical equipment. The initiative forms part of Uzbekistan's border strategy to expand trade relations with Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan and strengthen the country's presence in new regional markets. It is Yulia Jov reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
In China, the authorities have raised fuel prices once again this year, with the increases taking effect today. The hike comes as the war in Iran continues to rattle global oil markets. A News' Mahnur Makhdoom reports from Beijing.
China's state planner, the National Development and Reform Commission, has raised retail prices for gasoline and diesel with effect from May 22nd, the latest in a series of hikes since the Iran war sent oil prices surging. Gasoline prices will rise by around $10 per metric ton, with diesel close behind. Because China imports more than 70% of its oil, instability in the Middle East feeds quickly into domestic prices. And the impact is already showing, as Chinese gasoline demand has been falling since the Iran war upended global oil markets and is now on track to decline by as much as 5.5% this year, what would be the second steepest drop on record. Notably, back in April, Beijing actually capped a planned fuel price increase to cushion consumers from the full force of global volatility, a sign that authorities are trying to manage the economic fallout very carefully. Today's hike suggests that cushion has limits. Analysts warn that the increase will push up transportation and manufacturing costs at a time when China's economy is already dealing with softer consumer demand and weaker than expected industrial output. Manu Makhdoom, A News, Beijing.
All right, after a short break, we'll take a look at the top stories of the day. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. China and Russia have strongly criticized the United States for bringing murder charges against former Cuban President Raul Castro. Beijing urged Washington to abandon what it called a policy of coercion and threats, while Moscow described the pressure on Havana as approaching violence. The United States has accused Castro and 5 others over the 1996 shooting down of 2 aircraft, an incident in which 4 people were killed and which significantly worsened tensions between Washington and Havana. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the chances of reaching a peaceful agreement with Cuba remain low as Washington increases pressure on Havana. In the meantime, Rubio also warned that any attempt by Iran to introduce a tolling system in the Strait of Hormuz would threaten global trade and undermine ongoing diplomatic talks with the United States.
The president's preference is always a negotiated agreement that's peaceful. That's always our preference. That remains our preference with Cuba. I'm just being honest with you. You know, the likelihood of that happening, given who we're dealing with right now, is not high. But if they have a change of heart, you know, we're here. And in the meantime, we'll keep doing what we need to do.
It sounds $1 million in humanitarian aid yet?
Are we offended that the Cubans have not accepted our $100 million? Well, they say they've accepted it. We'll see if that means it. Because here's the thing. We're not going to do humanitarian aid that falls into the hands of their military company that they have, and then they take that stuff and they sell it at the dollar stores and put the money in their pocket. That's not going to work that way. So I was in Rome. That said, our preference is always a diplomatic solution, always. And you know, a negotiated agreement. That's always our preference. But to answer your question, if there's a threat to the national security of the United States, the president not just has the right, he has the obligation to address that national security threat. All right, let's go. It's the United States' national interest. So the future of Cuba belongs to the people of Cuba in terms of how they're governed, what the system looks like, and so forth. But the national security threat, that's 100% something we're going to focus on because that's about America. All right, last one, guys. They're against it. No one in the world is in favor of a tolling system. It can't happen. It would be unacceptable. It would make a diplomatic deal unfeasible if they were to continue to pursue that. So it's a threat to the world if they were to try to do that. And it's completely illegal, by the way. Well, that wouldn't, first of all, any changes to our posture in NATO would not for me to announce. That's something that the President and the Department of War would do. This is a foreign ministers meeting. We'll talk about some of those issues. I don't think anyone is shocked to know that the United States and the President in particular is very disappointed at NATO right now. The president's been very disappointed. Understand that there are many countries in NATO that agree with us that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, that Iran is a threat to the world. So the president said, fine, I'm going to do something about it. He's not asking them to commit troop. He's not asking them to send their fighter jets in, but they refuse to do anything. So I think the president looks at that and says, hold on a second. If all these countries around the world agree with us that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, that this regime is a threat to world peace and security, that already have missiles that can reach Europe. They don't have missiles that can reach America yet, but they have missiles that can reach Europe. We're actually step forward and do something about it, and everyone goes into hiding. Yeah, I think we're very upset about that. The president has made that very clear. I believe the Pakistanis will be traveling to Tehran today, so hopefully that'll advance this further. The president's preference is to do a good deal. That's his preference. It's always been his preference. If we can get a good deal done, that would be great. I'm not here to tell you that it's going to happen for sure, but I'm here to tell you that we're going to do everything we can to see if we can get one. But if we can't get a good deal, the president's been clear. He has other options. I'm not going to elaborate on what those are, but everybody knows what those are. But his preference is always a deal. His preference is always an agreement. His preference is always diplomacy. So let's see if we can get there. There's some good signs, but we understand this. I don't want to be overly optimistic as well. So let's see what happens over the next few days. Of their portfolio. We also think there's opportunities with Venezuelan oil. In fact, it's my understanding that the interim president of Venezuela will be traveling to India next week as well. So there's opportunities. There's a lot to work on with India. They're a great ally, a great partner. We do a lot of good work with them. And so it is an important trip. I'm glad we're able to do it because I think there'll be a lot for us to talk about. And we'll also meet.
Protesters gathered in Greenland's capital as the United States opened a larger diplomatic hub in Nuuk. The move comes amid continued tensions over President Donald Trump's ambition to increase U.S. influence over the Arctic island.
Several hundred demonstrators protested outside the new US consulate in Nuuk as Washington officially opened its expanded diplomatic mission in Greenland. Crowds waved Greenland's red and white flag and held signs reading USA, stop it, while chanting no means no and Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders. The new downtown consulate replaces a smaller facility on the outskirts of the capital. A US State Department spokesperson said the site offers greater capacity for diplomatic engagement in Greenland. Greenland Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen and several other local politicians declined invitations to attend the opening.
Over the heads of the Greenlanders, I think it's very colonialist rhetoric about buying this place and putting up hotels, which Trump has shared memes about. I think there has been talk over people's heads, and it's just a really unpleasant reminder of people as commodities or as a product, as something that can be bought and sold. It's very unpleasant to witness, and I think this ruthless rhetoric where military actions are not taken off the table. I also think it's completely wild and ruthless towards the people who live here, towards the children, towards everyone who sees this as their country.
The protest follows continued tensions after President Donald Trump expressed interest in greater US influence over Greenland. Greenland's government has said the island belongs to its people and will never be for sale.
To the Middle East now. Lebanese officials say at least 14 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on southern Lebanon this week, as mourners gathered on Thursday to bury victims of one of the deadliest recent attacks. The United Nations is also reporting a sharp rise in settler violence in the occupied territories.
Tensions remained high after Lebanese health officials reported 14 people were killed on Tuesday in Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon, with a health center also destroyed in Mashuk. The health ministry said the dead in Der Kanun and Nahar included 4 children and 3 women. On Thursday, mourners gathered to bury the victims of what was described as the deadliest single bombing raid in Lebanon in recent weeks. Dozens attended funerals in the southern town as rescue workers continued searching through the rubble.
We heard about the airstrike and immediately began working to evacuate the wounded and the martyrs. Today, we came to continue searching for the missing. There are 2 or 3 people still missing. The casualties here are 5 children and 3 women. There are many body parts, and their families will identify them through DNA testing.
Following attack, Israel's military said that it had targeted more than 25 sites of Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. The attacks came despite a 45-day ceasefire extension announced by the US State Department on May 16th, worsening the humanitarian crisis amid rising casualties and displacement. Fighting has continued despite a US-brokered ceasefire, with each side accusing the other of truce violations. The United Nations also said on Thursday that Israeli settlers carried out at least 49 attacks between May 12th and May 18th.
In just 1 week, between the 12th and the 18th of May, OCHA documented at least 49 attacks by Israeli settlers that caused casualties or damage, including a rise in arson attacks against homes, farmland, vehicles, and a mosque. With this, over 870 settler attacks across more than 220 communities have caused casualties or property damage this year alone.
The ongoing war between Israel and Lebanese armed group Hezbollah is expected to shrink Lebanon's economy by at least 7% this year and could cost the country an estimated $20 billion. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, more than 3,070 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on Lebanon since March 2nd, when Hezbollah fired on Israel, triggering a new war.
The Board of Peace's envoy for Gaza has warned the UN Security Council that without a lasting ceasefire, the territory risks becoming permanently divided, leaving more than 2 million Palestinians confined to less than half of Gaza. Here's what Nikolai Mladenov had to say.
Let me briefly speak about what a refusal to accept this roadmap means. If transition and decommissioning are delayed or refused, the Board of Peace will discuss meaningful and practical modalities to advance civilian stabilization, humanitarian relief, and recovery based on the architecture the parties have agreed to when the comprehensive plan was developed, approved by the Arab and Islamic states, and endorsed by the UN Security Council. While the Board of Peace continues its work, I want to be clear about the risks of inaction by the parties. The risk is that the deteriorating status quo becomes permanent, a divided Gaza, Hamas holding military and administrative control over 2 million people across less than half the territory. Those people are likely to remain trapped in the rubble, dependent on aid, with no meaningful reconstruction, because reconstruction financing will not follow where weapons have not been laid down. No investment, no movement, no horizon. And the result? Another generation of children growing up in tents, in fear, with despair as the most rational thing for them to feel. No security for Israel, and no viable pathway to Palestinian self-determination. This is a version of the future that Israelis, Palestinians, and the region should all fear and all mobilize to avoid. And I will say one more hard thing. The discussions have now matured to the point where the core political choices are clear and further delay will only deepen civilian suffering. The resources are ready to launch this next phase of implementation, and the commitments to disburse as needed are firm. This is not an obstacle. Every day is another day of a child in the tent without a school, a father without work, a family without a better future. That is the price of delay, and it is a price paid in Gaza by Palestinians.
Turning back to the World Urban Forum in Baku, assistant to the president of Azerbaijan, Hikmet Hajiev, said that the country aims to remain active on the international agenda and contribute to the global economy.
At the global level, we see emergence of the new hotbeds of the conflicts, and new tensions are emerging, and also food crisis, energy crisis, and fertilizer crisis that's also linked with the food crisis as such. And all of these things are happening at the global level, and also in the immediate neighborhood of Azerbaijan. And in the south, American and Iranian tension continues to be the case, and we're also wishing that the escalation will be the case between the two countries. In the meantime, times there are other hotbeds of the conflicts in our neighborhood. But in the midst of all of these tensions and difficulties and challenges, and Azerbaijan is trying to provide a platform for the international cooperation, dialogue and collaboration. I think that World Urban Forum is one of such a platform. We are trying to do our utmost best, but everybody is most welcome and our guests, and we can talk to one another and have a dialogue, and really world needs such a dialogue and platform for discussion. I think that World Urban Forum, together with you and together with our interlocutors, certainly without their support we also couldn't achieve, but we are providing the platform for the international discussion, including the most pressing and acute problems at the international level. Azerbaijan tries to be part of the international agenda, and also by virtue of its capabilities to contribute to the positive global agenda. COP29 was one of them. It was a really big challenge for Azerbaijan because we had a limited time to ensure organizational and logistical elements for organizing the event. I think that we have succeeded, but more than that, substantial part of the COP29. Azerbaijan's COP was considered like a financial COP because international community, particularly Global South and developing and also least developed countries and island and also landlocked countries were expecting new financing mechanisms. I think that Azerbaijan's COP29 provided that financing, and it was not only Azerbaijan, but together with the international community, we worked together and we produced results. That was a vision of Azerbaijan, to building the bridge between the different parts of the world, building the bridge between Global South and Global North as well. Because as you can see, Azerbaijan is also putting a lot of emphasis and support for galvanizing all the energy and resources of the Global South countries. And we also consider ourselves as a Global South. But bringing together Global South, we are not seeking isolation. We are also seeking new bridges of cooperation and collaboration with the Global North as well. And as a continuation of the same policy of building bridges and providing the platform for the cooperation and being part of the global positive agenda, Azerbaijan is also hosting the World Urban Forum, because as everybody sees, and in the discussions that we have also seen, that urbanization is an opportunity, is a challenge for every country. And urbanization is at full swing course in all countries. But in the meantime, we see billions of the people all around the world are without housing. And in the 2050, more people will live in the cities rather than some other places. But there will be additional pressure on the infrastructure of all our respective countries. We should start thinking and working on all of these issues now, not to wait for other opportunities. From all of these dimensions, as you can see, we have a consistency, and it's not just an event, and we would like to see real substance. I am also looking forward that as a result of the World Urban Forum, Baku Call for Action document will be adopted. It's like a consensus document. It's not just produced by the government, it's produced by the stakeholders, civil society institutions, professionals, academicians from all our respective countries, providing the platform, providing the document and basis of the reference for the whole international community. And assuredly, what I can add also that Azerbaijan will continue its endeavors to providing the platform for such an international activities and being the positive part of the global agenda. Thank you. Really, between Kenya and Azerbaijan, we indeed see a lot of potential for development of our bilateral cooperation at the political level, economic, trade, and including the people-to-people contacts level as well. We also commend all the work of the Kenyan government for the housing project. Is one of the unique and also massive and very successful housing project. I think that at the practical level, at the institutional level, Kenya and Azerbaijan may also conduct experience sharing exercises as well to learn from one another's experiences. And in the meantime, we have been privileged and indeed very much appreciate that His Excellency Mr. President visited Azerbaijan during the World Urban Forum. We should also be cognizant of the fact that Kenya is a host country for UN Habitat. Azerbaijan is per capita, per person, one of the leading tea drinking countries in the world. And Kenya is one of the leading tea producing countries. It's just one example how we can effectively cooperate. And also I'm myself very much fond of the Kenyan blue tea. It's yet another miracle. We didn't know about that. But it's just one example to how we can effectively contribute trade and economic relations between our countries. But more than that, we are looking at the energy cooperation and including the mutual investment and also tourism. Kenya is also one of the touristic destinations in the world and in Africa specifically. In the meantime, education. We also think that at the educational institutions of the two countries can also cooperate and providing the scholarship for our students. And all in all, really, we see as a bright future for the Kenya-Azerbaijan cooperation in all dimensions. Two countries are also discussing potential investment projects, and Azerbaijan is also a potential investor, and we may consider certain investment projects based on the interests of the two parties and for advancing our economic and business relations. Really, climate change, every country is suffering from the elements of the climate change, and in Baku, you see that on the very first day of the World Urban Forum, we also faced with the calamities of the climate change, and such a heavy rain with such an outflow of the water in the mid of May for Azerbaijan, for Baku, it was something unusual. In a sense, we also consider that as an indication of the elements of the climate change for our region. And it affects everybody, and it affects the Latin American region and many other parts of the world. And climate change also, I agree with you, that provides a difficulty for the habitat projects as well and for housing projects as well.
A Turkish court has annulled the 2023 Leadership Congress of the main opposition Republican People's Party, effectively removing party leader Özgür Özel from his position. The court said on Thursday that the decision was based on procedural irregularities linked to the party congress at which Özel was elected in 2023. Opposition party officials rejected the ruling, describing it as judicial interference in party affairs. Following the decision, the party called an emergency meeting of its senior leadership at its Ankara headquarters.
I'm at headquarters. Our friends are at the headquarters. From here on, we will be at headquarters day and night. We will protect what has been entrusted to us. The delegates who listened to the voice of the street put us here. Only they can remove us.
Violence in Honduras has left 25 people dead, including 6 police officers in 2 separate armed attacks. Authorities say investigations are underway into possible links to organized criminal groups.
Gunmen have killed 25 people, including 6 police officers, in 2 separate attacks in Honduras, authorities say, in one of the country's deadliest incidents in recent years. Security Minister Gerson Velasquez said the first attack took place at a plantation in Trujillo, where at least 19 workers were shot dead. He said the toll could rise as some bodies may have been removed before police reached the scene. Officials said the attack is suspected to be linked to an organized criminal group involved in drug trafficking and other illegal activity in the region. There are no arrests either. There are very strong indications that the perpetrators belong to a criminal structure that has been entrenched in that territory for years, that has connections to drug trafficking, and that has also been shifting towards fruit theft and invading some palm-producing farms. In a second incident near the Guatemalan border in Omoa, 6 police officers were killed during an assault on a unit carrying out an anti-gang operation. Security forces have been deployed and investigations are underway into both attacks. Honduras continues to face high levels of violence linked to organized crime, despite recent declines in overall homicide rates.
Saudi Arabia is stepping up security and crowd management ahead of Hajj, with around 1.5 million pilgrims expected in Mecca. This year's pilgrimage comes amid heightened regional tensions, but officials say preparations are in place.
Ahead of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, Saudi Arabia is preparing a range of measures to manage the influx of millions of worshippers. The Hajj is a once-a-year event that draws millions of Muslims to Mecca in Saudi Arabia to perform religious rituals that every able Muslim is expected to undertake at least once in their lifetime. This year marks the first time Saudi Arabia has proceeded with the annual pilgrimage, while also facing a period of heightened regional tensions, including a war that has seen direct strikes on Saudi territory. On Thursday, Saudi security forces demonstrated their readiness for the large-scale gathering in a display in Mecca. Personnel marched in formation during a parade as pilgrims from around the world continue to arrive in the holy city for the pilgrimage.
Everything felt completely normal, no different from any other year. In fact, this year the organization was even better, and the procedures were much smoother, with easier movement overall.
This year's pilgrimage will take place between May 25th and May 29th, with around 1.5 million pilgrims expected to travel to Saudi Arabia.
Now to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where hospitals are struggling to contain a growing Ebola outbreak, with medical workers facing shortages of space, medicine, and protective equipment as suspected cases continue to rise in Ituri province.
Hospitals in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo are struggling to cope as the country battles its latest Ebola outbreak, with hundreds of suspected infections and dozens of deaths reported so far. In Ituri province, medical workers are running out of space, medicine, and protective equipment as new patients continue arriving each day. At Ruampara General Hospital, tents have been set up outside to isolate patients as health workers try to prevent the virus from spreading further.
Although we keep receiving cases, we don't have enough space to admit and hospitalize them. We have set up a tent right here already, and perhaps we will need another one to try to isolate patients in the immediate future. There aren't enough medications, protective equipment, or even staff. We will also need support to try and increase the number of staff who can actually take care of these patients.
But concerns are also growing beyond hospitals. At the University of Bunia, students say there are still no proper preventive measures in place.
We don't have sinks to wash hands. We haven't even heard the university requires students to wear masks or put other basic precautions in place. This is truly terrible, and it really puts students at risk of catching the virus.
Authorities say the lack of a specific vaccine or treatment for this Ebola strain is adding to the challenge.
Staying in Africa, strikes on Mali's energy infrastructure have triggered widespread blackouts in the capital. As businesses and households turn to costly alternatives, authorities promise to secure the facilities.
Bamako is grappling with widespread electricity cuts after attacks on critical energy infrastructure claimed by the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims, known as JNIM. The outages, lasting between 24 and 48 hours in recent days, follow strikes on facilities connected to the Manantali hydroelectric dam in western Mali's Kayes region, one of the country's main power sources for the capital. Households and businesses are being forced to rely on generators and solar power as repeated blackouts disrupt daily life and economic activity.
The electricity cuts are affecting us greatly. In recent days, we can spend 24 hours without electricity. Especially when you don't have solar panels, it becomes very difficult with products that need refrigeration like milk, yogurt and others because they spoil easily when the refrigerator stops working. These days are very difficult for us.
Internet cafes and digital service providers are also struggling to stay operational as unstable electricity disrupts communications and online services.
For us, the solution came through solar panels. At the beginning of the crisis, we thought the situation was temporary, so we tried using generators. We first used an 8 kVA generator from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., but because of the long hours and heavy load, it broke down. We bought a second generator, and it also stopped working after only 3 months. It was after purchasing a third generator that I started considering solar panels seriously.
Solar equipment vendors say demand has risen sharply, but prices are also climbing. Some believe insecurity and wider global conflicts are driving up import costs, with most goods transiting through Dakar in Senegal before reaching Mali, adding pressure to already strained supplies. The Malian army says operations against armed groups are continuing in several regions to secure transport corridors and protect strategic infrastructure. Authorities have also pledged efforts to stabilise electricity supply and repair damaged installations.
A Cambodian refugee deported from the United States to Eswatini says he feared for his life after authorities flew him to the southern African kingdom and locked him inside a maximum security prison.
Eswatini, a small landlocked country in southern Africa, became part of a US deportation program that sent migrants to countries other than their own under special agreements. One of the deportees, Cambodian refugee Peep Rom, spoke about the journey and the conditions he faced after being sent from Louisiana to Eswatini through South Africa.
It was rough. When I went to Africa, it was rough. When I first, like being shackled for 21 hours, from when we landed there, we thought we was gonna get killed. I thought that I was gonna get killed.
After landing, authorities transferred Rom to a maximum security prison, even though he was not accused of committing a crime in Eswatini.
And they threw me in the prison when I got there. When I got there, they put me in a super maximum prison, and that right there, I feel as though that's illegal to put somebody in a prison and you haven't committed any crime in that country.
Lawyers challenging the deportation deal say the migrants were held without proper legal process.
Everything must follow due process, and you expect America to know that as a first world country and as a country that has demonstrated or postures themselves as a beacon of democracy and protection of civil rights and liberties. We'll expect them to know that if a person has finished their sentence and you don't desire them in your own territory, there are diplomatic processes or channels that you can follow. You touch base with their embassy and then you say you want to deport them back to their country. But America doesn't want to do that.
Eswatini's government has not publicly detailed the full terms of its agreement with Washington. Legal challenges against the deportation arrangement are continuing in the country's courts.
Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. Join us again on Monday. From all of us here at A News, have a nice evening and a very nice weekend.